So again, thank you very much for the invitation to be here with you tonight, and I look forward to your questions. Sir?
To what extent has Bill 10 been an election issue here in Alberta, and are the different parties taking a different position on this bill?
Okay, I'll just repeat this for the purpose of the video recording. To what extent has Bill 10 been an election issue, and to what extent are there differences in parties on this bill? It's my understanding that Parents for Choice in Education sent out a candidates questionnaire asking 8 or 9 questions of all candidates. Two or three of those are probably related to Bill 10. And those results would be posted at www.parentchoice.ca. And so I would leave people to look at that themselves. And yes, there are differences in the approaches taken by the political parties in regards to education issues generally. And I think you'll see indirect references to Bill 10 in there as well. Ma'am.
Drafting of Bill 10, was it primarily the politicians that did it, or were civil servants involved in that as well? Do you know?
Question was, what was involved in the drafting of Bill 10? Was it the politicians? Was it also civil servants involved? I don't know. Somebody, I think it was Bismarck, the Emperor of Prussia, who said something to the effect of, legislation is like sausages. You can enjoy a delicious sausage, but you don't really want to know how they're made. And with legislation, there's all kinds of lobbying that goes on. So I don't know to what extent it was the bureaucrats, the politicians. What we do see frequently, though, in the government of Alberta literature, we see frequent references to one individual, professor at the University of Alberta, Christopher Wells, and he seems to be kind of your one-stop shopping for research, kind of a sole source. And there's a lot of citations to his works, and that was certainly instrumental. Laurie Blakeman, MLA, was very instrumental. But in saying those, I'm not telling you anything that's not publicly available. So I don't know the intricacies and nuances of the lobbying. Sir.
So I'm from Brooks, and we already had a GSA in our public high school there for more than a year. I think it's ongoing for 2 years. Myself and a group of parents approached the school board. We had a meeting with our MLA. We've sent a petition in before Bill 10 was passed with over 300 signatures of the ones that I knew of that went in. There was other petitions that went in. And the only thing we got back, and a letter also directly to Gordon Dirks. We got a response on the letter, and everything else still went through. No answers, no one could give us any answers to it. And so when you talk about email and MLA, we've actually had sit-down meetings, petitions, letters, and no result. So the next thing that I've been considering is filing a complaint with the Alberta Human Rights Commission, looking at filing against the high school for running public things to do with the GSA and not informing us, because we consider that education being in the school. Their response to that was, it's not a captive audience, so if I put posters up on the walls of the school, not a captive audience. They were doing gay celebrity trivia over the intercom, and you could get the answer and win a prize for all the kids. No, not a captive audience, though.
Okay.
So there was a lot of things like that going on. So now we're at the point of, do we consider filing a complaint with the Alberta Human Rights Commission? And also in regards to the document the government put out November 2013, it highlights what a GSA is, how to start and run your GSA at the schools. And it talks about changing behaviors, educating the school. So it actually talks about all these activities going on and references educating, changing behaviors, and reinforcing, this LGBT lifestyle is a healthy one. And that's in direct conflict with with a freedom of belief and freedom of religion. So how does that, in your opinion, how does that hold with a complaint going to the Alberta Human Rights Commission?
Okay. You've raised a number of issues. I'm not sure off the top of my head how the Alberta Human Rights legislation would apply to the schools. And is that a public school you're referring to?
It's a public school.
Yeah. I don't know how that would apply. There is a legislative provision that the parents need to be involved, need to be notified when there's classroom teaching about sexuality and religion. I haven't looked at the section recently. I don't know if that applies as well, and it probably doesn't. But the Act itself would indicate whether that applies to the school as a whole, and whether we get into this whole idea of the culture and character of the school, because I think that's what your remarks are addressed at. You're concerned about the overall culture and character and learning environment and ideological climate of the school as a whole, and I don't know if the provincial legislation would apply to that. You've got some very nuanced, detailed points, but if you see me afterwards, I'll give you my card, and let's continue the discussion afterwards on that. In terms of the non-responsiveness of MLAs, you know, I can't comment about particular MLAs, but in a general sense, I've heard anecdotally, I've heard it, I'll repeat it, but just with a caveat that this is third-hand information. But I've heard that one of the MLAs that voted against Bill 10, he had hundreds of phone calls and letters telling him to vote against Bill 10. And I've also heard, and this not so anecdotally, this more I've heard from other MLAs, they had hundreds of emails and phone calls telling them to vote in favor of Bill 10 and to vote in favor of similar bills and motions in the past. And they had zero or close to zero emails and phone calls telling them to vote against those measures. So I don't want to discount your own negative experience that you've had an unresponsive MLA, and I take you at your word. I'm sure that that's true in your case, and it may be true in other cases. However, I stand by the point that as a general rule, if there's 500 emails and phone calls in favor of something, doesn't matter what, I'm talking about a general principle, not even Bill 10 per se, you get 500 emails and phone calls in favor of something and 3 or 4 emails and phone calls against, most MLAs, unless they have a really strong conviction about that particular issue, most MLAs are going to go with what's the most pressure. Saw some other hands. Sir,
so
and then the lady in the back.
Basically, what Bill 10 is saying, the parents, they can't teach to the kids moral values, because whatever you teach in the school, there will be something else that you can't say no. For example, I choose my kids to be in Christian school. Now with this Bill 10, they will come, they can be a little club that I'm against, because my values, my principles, and I don't have any rights as a parent.
That's true. You have no rights as a parent except to teach what you believe at home, but then your tax dollars are paying for a school that you send your kids to that are going to teach your kids the opposite. And that's what Bill 10 does, is it creates a situation where for many Alberta parents, including Alberta parents who have their kids in public schools, creates a situation where the parents are teaching one thing at home, and then the kids are going to the school, and there's not just a neutrality of no information about it, which I think is something most people could live with, but there's a direct opposition to what you're teaching your kids at home. That is what Bill 10 is about, and that's what it does. It creates a situation for parents where what you teach at home is actively and aggressively undermined by the culture and character and learning environment of the school.
If that would be a kind of bullying towards the parents?
Is that bullying of parents?
It is because if we don't have the right to choose what can be taught to our children in school. So that's bullying, right?
You're
So
not.
it's like we don't have opinions, so you say just suck it up. That's not fair.
You're not the first person to point out the irony of legislation that supposedly is intended to curb bullying and yet says that the principal shall do this. So it's the force of law, it is coercion. The principal must do this. Your school must have this kind of club. So I see three hands. First lady in the back, and then this lady and this lady. You had a question?
A few years back, on the steps of the legislature, there were 2,000 plus parents protesting the Redford government and then Minister of Education Thomas McCaskill putting the Human Rights Act into the School Act. And they actually ended up filibustering their own plan there. And I'm wondering if they're bringing Bill 10 back through so quickly was just another attempt at doing the same thing they've been trying to do all along.
Well, it's, you know, just as a guess, because I don't know what's in the minds of other people. But perhaps it's very well possible that the government saw that if you bring in this kind of legislation the normal way, which is typically bills are brought in and it takes a lot of time from you know, the first reading, and then they're shelved, and there's consultations, and there's MLA committees. Sometimes there's public hearings. Sometimes there's witnesses that come and talk to the MLA committee. There's amendments made. There's debate, and the whole legislative process takes, you know, weeks, if not months. Typically, the only exceptions to that are emergencies where maybe there's an illegal strike, and so legislature meets very quickly and very quickly passes a bill to force the workers back to work, or, you know, that sort of crisis situation. Other than that, most legislation, you have a process that is rather lengthy. And perhaps it could have been, and this is purely speculation, that what the government did in 2012 was the normal legislative process, which gives people an opportunity to learn about the legislation, and it also, if people don't like the bill, it gives those people an opportunity to get organized and to speak out. And so what we had instead, we had one bill introduced in December, which was already an attack against parental rights in education. We had a promise by the Premier that there would be consultation, and then March 10th, you get this bill, which from a parental rights standpoint is even worse than was there in December. It's pushed through in a matter of hours. So that did effectively make it impossible for Albertans. I mean, how are you going to get up to Edmonton? You know, even flying from Medicine Hat, you're not going to be able to get up there quickly enough to mobilize or to hold a rally or demonstration.
That's legal?
Yes, it's legal. It was the legislative performance, my understanding is, you know, first reading, second reading, third reading, royal assent, coming into force. Everything was done legally. That's not to say it was done fairly or justly. There's a lady here and then a lady there.
Two questions. Can they do a gay straight alliance at the elementary level?
Can they do a gay straight alliance at the elementary level? There's nothing in the bill that would prevent that or preclude that. It says if any student. A student could be, I guess, from kindergarten to grade 12. So, you know, now maybe somebody say, oh, you know, that wasn't their intention, or that might never happen. But just going by what the bill says, yes, you can have gay straight alliances in elementary schools.
When you enroll your child into a school, does the parent have the right to ask if there's a gay straight alliance, and do they have to answer the question?
Does a parent have a right, upon enrolling their child in a school, to ask whether there will be a gay alliance, a gay straight alliance at the school already existing, and do they have to answer? I don't know. I think the more problematic issue is not so much the existence of the gay straight alliance, because I mean, ideally a parent should be able to get that information from the school, but even if they didn't get it directly, in this information age and everything is on, you know, internet and Twitter and Facebook, it probably would not be that hard for parents to find out whether there is a GSA at their school or not. So that's not really, on a practical level, that's not the big issue. But the big issue is that a parent does not have any right to be notified if their child is attending a Gay Straight Alliance. So there's nothing in there in the bill, and it's confirmed by the government's website, which is relevant because even though that's not the law, you have the law and then you have government website about what the law means. The government website is not legally binding, but it is very relevant because it tells you how the government is interpreting the legislation. So no need to notify parents if your kids are attending this club or any other club. Again, this can be used by any interest group that says that they intend to create a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environment can get their club into the school. And so it really gives outsiders of all kinds to access into the schools to force school clubs to be established regardless of what parents want. Question right here.
Yeah, so starting a club that's good for the kids and a welcoming environment, that means they could start a Bible study, right?
I think it does. The question, again, for purposes of the recording and in case not everybody heard it, if you can go to just about any club, just let me put the text. I almost have it memorized, not quite. So I'm just going to put the text in front of my. So the question was, could this be used to put in a Bible study club or a religious club or a Christian club or whatever? My reading of the bill is yes. If one or more students attending a school operated by a board request a staff member employed by the board for support to establish a voluntary student organization or to lead an activity intended to promote a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environment that respects diversity and fosters a sense of belonging, the principal shall permit the establishment of the club or facilitate the activity. So any voluntary student organization that is intended to promote a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environment. So I suppose, and I mean this might drive some of the atheist and agnostic parents who have their kids in public schools who would not want a Bible study club or a religious club at their public school because they believe that religion has no place in public schools and they don't like the impact that this would have on the school's culture or character or learning environment. But if that religious club presented itself so as to comply with the legislation, then the principal would have to acquiesce to it. Now, and the principal would have to, I guess, decide whether it qualifies under the Act. Yes.
But there's a key word in there where I doubt that could happen because the key word words are respects diversity. So that a Bible study may not be able to fall into that category.
Yeah. Well, diversity is not defined, but most times when I see the word used, it's typically as a club to beat people over the head to promote one particular thing. That's usually the practical definition of diversity. So that would be, well, the club would need to respect diversity. So it doesn't need to promote diversity, it needs to respect diversity. So would a Bible study, if the Bible study club respects diversity, which maybe it could by respecting different interpretations of Scripture, then it may very well qualify under Bill 10.
Well, I'm just thinking how wonderful it would be. Prayer got slipped out under the door so quickly, maybe we could slip it back in.
Well, let's just say the opportunities are endless. I think the gentleman there, did you have a question, or is it?
I did, yes. There's the key thing. You talked about the definition of what homophobia means nowadays. I just see that definition, how it's being used, running into colliding with the any religion really, what their definition is. So I could very much see one of those religious organizations or clubs promoting their ideology, Muslim, Christian, whatever, as not being deemed safe and respectful.
Yeah, we're really in the realm of speculation, but it's certainly worth considering. think the lady there with, yes.
Just wanted to mention, I'm on the board of a small Christian school that does receive government funding in this community. We happened to be monitored by Alberta Ed last week, and this topic came up. And we were told that if we were to have a club that just promoted that kind of safe, caring environment, and that if we stuck to the classical definition of tolerance, and we were promoting respect for people made in God's image, that to the Alberta Ed representatives who monitored us, that was acceptable.
Okay.
So I think there may be, if we work carefully, then there may be some room for us to uphold what we would consider a biblical worldview, and to provide that to the children in our care.
I think if Bill 10 stays on the books in its current form, I don't think there's necessarily going to be huge consequences come this September or next September or next September. But if this law stays on the books, what prevails or what triumphs is the wording of the legislation. And I wouldn't put it past the government to initially, give everybody a false sense of assurance and say, oh yeah, you're independent Christian school, you can start your own anti-bullying club, you'll be fine, that's fine by us. What a bureaucrat says is not the law of Alberta, it's what's passed by the legislature that is the law of Alberta. And the government, if it's clever, probably would take that approach initially, and they would tell their bureaucrats, oh yeah, just reassure all the private schools that they can have their own homegrown anti-bullying club, and they'll be complying with the legislation by doing that. That can be overturned in a split second by the education minister, or even the deputy minister, if he can persuade the minister. That can be overturned in a split second, and they can come back. That same bureaucrat can come back to you tomorrow and say, no, that doesn't qualify under the Act. It's not a voluntary student organization. This is important, actually. The Act says if a student wants to start a voluntary student organization, and I've had a lot of discussions about this bill with a lot of people in the last few weeks, and I've heard from a lot of board members and principals and so on of smaller Christian schools who say, look, we'll just start our own welcoming club, we'll start our own anti-bullying club, and we'll be just fine. But there's a problem there that if the school establishes the club, then it's not really a voluntary student organization. That's one problem. The other problem is the school could start its anti-bullying club, its welcoming club, but then another student, a little bit in the future or a long ways in the future, another student can come along and say, that anti-bullying club that's established by the school, it is not intended to promote a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environment that respects diversity and fosters a sense of belonging. I want to start a club that really is intended to promote a welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environment. And then you've got a problem, because the principal might say, no, we've got our club, and the student might say, no, but the club that's in place is not what I want. There's another problem with the naming. The Act says expressly that students have the right to choose the club's name, and the club's name can be Gay Straight Alliance or Queer Straight Alliance. That can be a name. That doesn't have to be the name, but that can be the name. There is nothing that any principal in Alberta can do if the students themselves who are in charge of that club, if the students decide it's going to be called a Gay Straight Alliance or a Queer Straight Alliance, it will be called a Gay Straight Alliance. And there's nothing parents or principals or teachers or anybody else that, there's nothing anybody can do about it. So the naming rights are there. And I mean, this is a bit of an issue in the Catholic schools. I've heard some people say that, Catholic schools have got their own life framework or whatever it is, and the Catholic schools are not going to have their clubs being called a Gay Straight Alliance. Well, I'm sorry, but Section 35.1 sub 3 says that Gay Straight Alliance and Queer Straight Alliance are names that students can have the legal right to choose for their club. So if there's any Catholics who think that they can avoid having a gay-straight alliance because they're going to have their life framework, have their own policy in place, that's naive. That's not what the law says. Sir,
So,
and then the lady over there.
the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that parents have priority right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. So they talk about it for home.
Well, Canada is a signatory to the Universal Declaration. That does not mean it is, strictly speaking, is not binding law in Canada. However, it is a principle that the courts will consider, so these international covenants. So 1948, and this is relevant, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed not long after World War II, in a context where you had governments that were indoctrinating, and in particular Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, and there have continued to be governments since that time, but you had governments that said, you know what, we don't care what you old people believe, we've got your kids, and we've got the minds of your kids, and we're going to teach your kids what we want, and we don't care what you're going to teach them at home. Your children belong to us, your children belong to the state. That was the context in which the Universal Declaration was drafted and signed. And so Section 26 says, parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. And the reason that language is there is to protect against a totalitarian government adopting a policy of forcing indoctrination and ideology onto the children.
Right now.
I don't think that we're in danger of getting rid of our elections every 3 or 4 years. But we're not a totalitarian government, but there's an important principle here that just because something is popular in the culture, in a free country, the government's not going to force every child to learn that, right? And it's not just about GSAs, that could be about anything. Just because there's a majority belief about something doesn't make it right for the government to say that we're going to teach that majority viewpoint to every child in the province, regardless of what parents want.
So for the kids, our children sleep 8 hours a day. They go to school how many hours? 8 hours a day, they're 16. They eat breakfast, lunch, everything, put in 1 hour, 2 hours, 18. So the parents have just a few hours to teach them moral values. So as a parent, I look at high school, schools, they can go with my values so they can teach my children because they spend so much time in school. So with this, basically, it's saying to the government, they say, you know, this is how it's going to be to your children, how it has to be raised, take it or leave it.
Yeah, well, this...
Because you can't say no to parents, right? And that is against the rights. Am I right?
Yes. Now, should I repeat that, or did it get properly recorded or not? Maybe. The gentleman says that the children are spending a lot of time in schools. There's 25 hours of classroom time, plus they're there at lunch, and sometimes even before and after school to some extent. And is the government essentially saying that this is the way it's going to be, it doesn't matter what you're teaching at home? And my answer is yes, up to a certain point, in the sense that the Bill 10 removes the right of parents to determine what clubs will or will not be allowed at their children's school. So that has an impact on the school character, the school culture, the school learning environment. So it is extremely disrespectful of parental rights.
Yeah, because then it won't be any rights
We got,
for us, basically.
there's a question over here, I think.
I was just going to say, is there any form of regulation allowed for these clubs in the Bill 10? Because ultimately, like you said, the school could establish a club. A student could come up and say, no, I'm not happy with this club, I want my own club. The principal has to accommodate that. So let's say 4 students have done this, each one saying the previous club is not inclusive enough, I want to start my, like, at what point can they say to them, no, we have 10 clubs going on? There's no longer a basis. They're all tolerant, making up, meant to be welcoming, and have they allowed for any regulation of that? Like, is there any point where somebody can say no to the kids?
Well, the question is, what happens if there's 2 or 3 or 4 clubs, and every time there's another student or a new student comes along and says, well, I don't like any of those clubs. My reading of the Act is that there's no restrictions. It doesn't have to be limited to just one club. It doesn't say that there shall be the one. It says any student that wants to create a voluntary student organization that promotes the caring, respectful, yada, yada, yada learning environment. So it is open then for there to be more than one club, because it doesn't limit it to one club.
And then just going with that, so with it being a voluntary club, let's say a student starts one, calls it Gay Straight Alliance, and get like either a teacher or some adult comes to facilitate, and nobody's interested. Is that then going to be a repercussion back on school where the government says you didn't try hard enough? Or will they just accept if
That's a good question. If the Gay Straight Alliance or some other club is started at the school and nobody's interested in it, could there be repercussions for the school? My reading of the Act is no. It doesn't say that schools have to succeed in making the club popular or well attended. What the school must do, though, the school has 2 choices. They can help to establish the club or help to facilitate the activity, or if they are unwilling or unable to do that, or if the school is unable or unwilling to find a staff member that's willing to do that, then the minister will appoint a responsible adult to do it. So the school's obligation is to help to establish the club and to help to facilitate the activity, but there's no requirement that the club or activity be well attended. So, to this lady first and this gentleman, where are we on time? Should we say another 4 questions, or I have no idea what time it is? Well, let's say 4 more questions, and then I'll stay around after as well for some one-on-one conversation. So, lady here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, who's the mastermind that thought the kids should be in charge?
Who's the mastermind who thought the kids should be in charge? Well, this is another problem with Bill 10, is that Bill 10 says if the student asks the principal, Bill 10 is silent as to who may have coached or guided the student and who may have given the student the idea or the training or the encouragement. Bill 10 is completely silent on that. So it certainly opens the door for any special interest group to recruit or find their student that's going to put the request to the principal. Because the only thing that the Act says is if the student asks the principal shall facilitate the club. So there's no restrictions on what can happen. This gentleman, and then the lady in the back, and then that lady.
I'm just saying, John, it may be time to wind up soon. It is very
Time to wrap up. Yeah. So we'll take this gentleman and then one more in the back, and we'll wrap it up.
If history repeats itself, Bill 10 will be tested at some school, somewhere, at some point. And I'd just like to know, maybe more from your heart than from a legal aspect, how do you feel would be the best approach for those who are very conservative morally in approaching what may happen going forward?
So your question seems to be, or let me speak it back to you to see if I've understood. For people who are morally conservative, what should be done for going forward? I don't quite understand your question.
What's the best approach to take to prevent or to resolve issues that may arise in the future?
Okay, the best approach to take to resolve problems in the future. My own view is that the best possible thing to do is to repeal Bill 10 or to amend it so that it expressly and specifically exempts, in the same way that Quebec's law did, the religious and private schools. The law itself needs to be changed because in its current form on the books, it's only a matter of time before there's a gay straight alliance in every school in Alberta. If it's important to remember that what the law says, that's what is binding. So if this law stays on the books, you know, you might have your interim reprieve and, you know, have some autonomy and still do your own thing. But if this law is on the books, then 2 years from now, 6 years from now, 10 years from now, the government has a right to enforce it at any time. The court action is not a good idea, certainly, maybe only as a backup, but it's not a good idea because unpredictable outcome, expensive, very time consuming. So the best possible thing to do is to work through the democratic process and see to it that the bill is amended so that it does come into line with the Supreme Court ruling in Loyola. That's my view. Last question here, and then we'll wrap things up.
Could you just repeat that website, please, that you mentioned before with regards to what current candidates have been asked or?
Yes. Yes, the website that has the answers of candidates on educational issues is it's Parents for Choice in Education, and the website is www.parentchoice.ca, and parent choice is one word. So www.parentchoice.ca for that website. Again, thank you so much for coming out to this meeting tonight. It testifies to your concern about our province and about your children and about democracy in Alberta. So thank you so much for coming out to this event tonight.